Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris Nalwasky, and we're bringing you another episode of the TKR podcast. I'm joined by Craig Epstein. Craig, how's it going today?
Going good, going good. Watching that game the other day wasn't exactly the most thrilling thing in the world, but it is what it is, and now it's time to talk about it.
Yeah, so obviously the game Craig is mentioning is Rutgers, Maryland at Jersey Mike's Arena the other day. It seemed like it was obviously a great crowd. Filled up pretty good. There was a lot of football recruits there. All the fans were excited. But as for the basketball team, they're pretty much kind of a no show, which is kind of surprising, obviously, because they've obviously play extremely well at home compared to on the road. But yeah, Maryland won 68-60. The score was, I guess, closer than the game actually was, I guess you could
Mhm.
say. But yeah, Craig, just overall, man, what were some takeaways from
It was yeah, it was the first. Well, starting with the first half. I mean, the first half was just Maryland was just better than them in every phase of the game. I mean, unlike it was weird because the first half of the first time they played was 10 days prior
Mhm.
was almost the same exact score. There
Yeah,
were
yeah.
Rutgers was trailing in this one by 12. The last one was by 11. But in the last one, you could tell it was kind of more Rutgers kind of just getting in their own way with a bunch of turnovers, kind of just sloppy play. And, that's kind of what led to them being down by 11. This game was just Maryland just outclassed them. You could just tell they looked like the better team. And Rutgers started the half. What was it? They were 3 for 3.
Yeah.
And it looked like they were going to turn things around from that Minnesota game. But then they went on. What was it? They just went an absolute cold streak. What was it? I don't even remember. 1 for 19,
Yeah.
something like that. Something just really bad. And then they were trailing. They were just trailing. I don't remember what the largest deficit was,
I,
but
th-
they
I
were
think I think it
trailing
was I think it was 20. I think they were down by 20
in
at
the
one
first
point.
half.
Yeah, first half. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, they were down by 20 at one point, and then they had a little spurt at the end there where I think they finished like 5 for 9 shooting,
Mhm.
and they were able to make it a 12-point game. So while on paper it's like, oh, Rutgers is down by 12, they just came back from 11 for them 10 days ago. It's like, yeah, but it might look similar, but you could tell it wasn't similar. Maryland just, you could tell from the first half, looked like the better team.
Sure. Yeah. So, Fats Russell and Eric Ayala, two guards for the Terrapins. They scored 23 and 22 points respectfully. They both made 5 3-pointers. It looked like they couldn't miss either of them. And Maryland shot 53%, 54%, from in the first half overall, and 50% from deep. They finished shooting 37% and 47% respectively. Last time out, they made a whole bunch of free throws in the first half, like you mentioned. Rutgers turned the ball over, but this time, yeah, man, they just were shooting the ball extremely well. Rutgers wasn't able to get any stops anywhere. Pikel, a lot of times, we question the offense. And Steve Pikel, head coach Steve Pikel, always goes, always wants to talk about the defense. He wasn't happy with the defense. Yeah, and then as for Rutgers side, they had a drought of like 7 minutes or so. They shot only 9 of 28 in the first half. They finished 34% in the game. They only made 8 or 24 3-pointers, and 4 of them were from Geo Baker. So, Geo had a good game, 16 points. Ron had 16 points, but it feels like most of that was in the second half. And he dealt with some foul trouble also. Turnovers, they had 17 turnovers, which obviously isn't helpful when you need to make comebacks. And Maryland was shooting the ball so well. So yeah, I mean, just a quiet night overall for the whole team. I think Ron Harper Jr. talked about how they kind of like ran their plays kind of like in slow motion almost, which is kind
Mhm.
of interesting. I mean, I don't know kind of what he means by that, but he mentioned that, like, obviously they played 10 days ago, so Maryland knows what they run. And so maybe they thought this game was going to be easier, but yeah, I don't know. Maryland rebounded well also. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
this
this
is
zone defense they've played really the last 2 games with Minnesota and Maryland, like it's really stopped Rutgers, their offense. It's just completely thrown them out of rhythm. And that's why it's just why they haven't, it just feels like they haven't, like I said, they just haven't been in any rhythm the last 2 games. like basically their best option the last two games has just been just give it to Gio and let him shoot. Because I mean, what was
Yeah.
it, 25 last game,
Mhm.
16 this game? He was
Mhm.
basically just, keeping that, like, again, keeping that. He kept them. It felt like he kept them in this game, and it's just, you need more than just that to really win in this league. I mean, like we always say, like, if you're not good enough to beat this Maryland team, I mean, if you're not good enough to beat this Maryland team, then come February, it's gonna get really bad.
Yeah. I mean, Maryland is coming off of a big win against Illinois, I think it was, but yeah, Maryland kind of turned their season around after not having the head coach the head coach leaving. So yeah, if you're gonna beat Rutgers, just play zone. I mean, Caleb McConnell was he kept shooting the ball. He doesn't really shoot all that much, but he kept taking shots because it was kind of almost like fool's gold. I mean, he was open, so he was taking a shot, but
Well, yeah,
he was
it looked like they were just kind of Ben Simmonsing him. They were just daring him to shoot, and
exactly.
and
Yeah,
he was obliging and just didn't go in.
exactly. And then obviously, Maryland would get the rebound and score at the other end, and that's how things kind of snowballed from there. So yeah, he was 4 for 15. I do want to mention Cliff O'Murray having a good game, double double, 11 points, 13 rebounds, 5 of 7 shooting, only 2 fouls and 2 blocks. But again, you're gonna need a third scorer. Gio and Ron Harper Jr. both had 16 points, but Paul McCahey over 3, 20 in 27 minutes. I mean, that's kind of another thing where Caleb kept, he was shooting the ball more and Paul wasn't. Andre Hyatt was 1 for 4. So yeah, Rutgers is gonna need another, third, fourth scorer to, have any chance against the better teams in the league coming up. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
so
this pretty much this entire game, really up like basically up this entire game, they were down by double digits. Like I forget what point they fell down by double digits, but it basically stayed that way till the last like couple minutes, maybe last minute. I don't
mhm,
even remember, but it was just it was almost the entire game they were down by double digits, and they kept trying to fight back, and it felt like maybe if they can bring this thing into single digits, they have a run in them.
sure.
But like we said, every time they made a little bit of a run, it was either Fats Russell, which is an unbelievable name, by the way. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I think it's a great name. Whether it was Fats Russell, Ayala, or even Wahab. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just yeah, they were just killing him.
yeah.
So there was you just I mean, you're not going to win any games that could try and falling behind by 20 and having to spend the rest of the game fighting back.
Yeah, and they got into a whole against Minnesota the game prior too, and that's why they ultimately lost by 3. I mean, they let Willis go for a career high that game. So again, he was hot from behind the arc. So yeah, something's
And
got
I
got
do
to
know,
change.
I mean, I do have to say this, that a lot, yeah, a lot of their shots were insane.
Yeah,
Like there were plenty of shots where you say to yourself, like, there's no defense for that because they're just taking these bombs that just go in, and there's really nothing you can do about that. But same thing with the last game with Peyton Willis.
mhm.
But at the same time, what's the common denominator between those two games is that it came against Rutgers. So at some point, you gotta, I don't like. There's not much. It's not really an answer for it, but it's just other than just keep trying to play better defense.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously Rutgers calling card. I mean, a couple of games ago against Iowa, we were praising Rutgers defense and the job they did against them, and then ever since then they've lost both games they've played so far. So
Yeah, and like we said, you're not going to win every game 46 to what was it 46 to
46, 42, I think
44.
it
I don't
was.
even
Yeah,
remember,
yeah,
48 to 46.
right.
You're not going to win. You're not going to win games like that. Like at this point, college basketball teams can probably roll out of bed and score like almost 70 points. So I mean, you can play as great defense as you want, but at some point you're going to have to start making shots. And if 60 points, and I forget what was the last game, 60 against Minnesota, 60
65, I
points.
think it's 65. Yeah,
Yeah, 60, 65, I mean, it's just not gonna cut it.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to defense. I know Pico again. I mentioned earlier. Pico is always, he was upset about the defense. I mean, that's one thing that's gonna need some more improvement again. The next couple of games. again, they played extremely well against Iowa, but at the same time, Iowa missed a bunch of threes where they had, open looks. But yeah, I mean, they have games coming up. They have some opportunities, 2 games against, a Nebraska and Northwestern coming up where they can kind of get back into the groove a little bit. Again, they're on the road. Rutgers doesn't play well on the road, but Harper and Pikel said the other day that there's opportunities left. There's still a month left of basketball. But as you and I, Craig, have talked about, the teams they have left in the schedule are obviously at the top in the conference
Hmm.
and the country. So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, definitely not.
So all right. So yeah. You have anything else about this game that we didn't touch on or anything about Saturday's game?
Um, Not really. I mean, I guess going back, we could talk. I guess we could talk a little bit about the bench in this wasn't great
Sure.
either, as opposed to the last of the Iowa game. They were good. So the bench kind of was riding a little bit of a hot streak, but this game definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, Andre Hyatt was the leading guy off the bench with 5. Dean had
Mhm.
1. Everybody else had just zeros, just donuts.
Yeah.
Jane Jones finally got some minutes, even if it was just 5. Didn't put up, but he didn't put up any shots. I mean, it's just it's just tough. It's not. I mean, it's just you're not. It's just tough to win when your
Mhm.
bench isn't performing like it should.
Sure. Yeah, like we talked about, it's the Gio and Ron show. If they don't score, Rutgers loses.
Yep.
And 16 points and 16 points is pretty good, but they didn't get much help, so that's not gonna really fly, obviously, like we talked about. But yeah, going back to the bench, it's good to see Jane Jones get some playing time. Obviously, only 5 minutes. You usually when he comes in, he tries to put up shots. He didn't, and maybe that's why he hasn't played as much because when he comes in, he automatically shoots the ball. But again, if Rutgers wants to look for another scorer, he's an option there. I am a little bit surprised that Jalen Miller only played 7 minutes. Maybe that had to do with the fact that Gio was relatively shooting the ball well. He acts Baker has 11 3-pointers in the last 2 games, which is pretty good, obviously. But yeah, I think maybe Miller probably would have played pretty good defense on Russell or even Ayala. So maybe that's hindsight 2020 there. Maybe he would help in that regard. But yeah, I mean the bench is they're gonna need something. They're gonna need to step up in the bench there.
Yeah, just going back to Jalen Miller, I would say he probably didn't get that much playing time just because the entire game they were down. I
Mm.
mean, Jalen Miller is mainly, I would say, defensive, like you see it. He's mostly
Yeah.
a defensive player
Mhm.
that it's like I really like Jalen Miller, but it's almost to the point where when he's out there, sometimes it feels like they're just playing with 4 offensive players because he just doesn't put up any shots.
Mhm.
I mean, he's a good ball handler. He's very fast, plays very, very good defense, but I mean, he just doesn't take many shots and doesn't score many points. So, and when you're down by double digits for most of the game, it's just he's just not going to see that much playing time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. So yeah, not a good game for Rutgers. 68-60. They're 11-8 now, I believe, overall. So, and they are in the middle of the pack now in the Big Ten at 5-4 in the conference. Again, if they beat Minnesota, if they beat Maryland, they could have had a shot for being basically tied atop the conference right now with Illinois,
Yeah,
which is pretty crazy. Which that honestly would have set them up for a better February. But now, NCAA tournament hopes are kind of, I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, they're gonna have to basically upset, a lot, pretty
yeah.
much every team,
At
next
this
month to
point,
have a
at
shot.
this point, February went from something you fear to like now it's just it's basically their salvation.
Yeah,
Like if you want to that's just it. I mean, they're gonna have to pull off. They're gonna have to go off in February if they want to have any shot. But
sure.
it's just tough to see.
Yeah, I mean, Pikel and Harper, they were obviously optimistic after the game, but they know what's at stake. They know what they got to do. Um, I wrote it. I wrote it in my column the other day how all the guys were talking about how this was kind of like revenge tour type situation where maybe they thought it was going to be easy getting back to tournament because they did it. With quote unquote the last 2 years. I don't know exactly, but yeah, this team kind of dug themselves in the hole. With a lot of a lot of bad games early on, bad losses. So, and then obviously it's continuing a little bit. So, I know, one day that they look great. The next time, they don't. You don't know what team you're gonna get anymore. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
so
And now
all
they
right.
face
Well,
the two bottom teams in the Big Ten. So this is it.
yeah. If they lose to Nebraska on Saturday, then it's done.
You could if the fat lady ain't singing, and like I said on Twitter, she ain't
Yeah.
singing now. She's definitely tuning up.
Yep. And Fats Russell was definitely singing too.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, thanks on that note. Thanks everybody for joining. This has been another edition of the TKR podcast for Chris and Craig. Thanks for listening.